At 40,000 feet above the Nevada desert, Major Sarah Ace Mitchell felt the crushing weight of 6 Gs pressing against her chest as she guided the F-35 Lightning II into a steep climb. The experimental Thunderbolt 7 targeting system hummed to life on her heads-up display, its green indicators flickering with an almost organic rhythm. She had flown this profile dozens of times before, but something about today felt different. A subtle wrongness that made her grip the stick just a little tighter. Through the tinted visor of her helmet, the vast expanse of ochre sand below seemed to shrink away, as if the earth itself was warning her to turn back. But Major Sarah Mitchell had never been one to heed warnings she couldn't verify with her own eyes. Her breathing remained measured and controlled despite the strain her body endured, years of training overriding the primal urge to gasp for air. Reaching test altitude in 5, she reported calmly into her oxygen mask, her voice betraying none of the physical pressure threatening to force her into unconsciousness. The response came immediate and clinical in her helmet. "Roger that, Thunderbird 1. Proceed with weapon system test sequence when ready." Sarah leveled the aircraft at 40,000 feet, her gloved fingers dancing across the glass cockpit display, activating the Thunderbolt 7 targeting system. The heads-up display flickered to life, outlining potential targets on the desert floor with eerie precision. This was the moment of truth, the 4th test flight of a system that had consumed 4 years of research and billions in development. "Initiating test sequence Alpha," she announced, her eyes scanning the readouts. Something flickered across her screen. A momentary glitch, perhaps. But in the world of experimental aircraft, there was no such thing as an insignificant anomaly. She frowned beneath her mask. "Control, I'm seeing fluctuations in the targeting parameters." "Readings normal from our end, Major. Continue with the test." Sarah hesitated, her father's voice echoing in her memory. "Trust your instincts before your instruments." General William Thunderbolt Mitchell had passed that wisdom to her long before he perished in the skies over the same desert a decade ago. A training accident, they called it. Equipment failure. She had never fully believed it. "Requesting secondary verification of targeting systems," she insisted, banking the aircraft into a gentle turn. The sky suddenly erupted with warning indicators, red lights flooding her cockpit as the Thunderbolt 7 system surged with unexpected power. The aircraft shuddered violently beneath her, its nose pitching upward against her commands. "Control, I've lost primary flight controls. System override is active. Repeat, I have an autonomous system override." The radio crackled with urgent voices as Sarah fought with the stick, her muscles straining against forces no human was meant to counteract. The jet continued its climb, engines screaming as they pushed beyond safe operational parameters. "Ejecting is not an option," she muttered to herself, knowing the experimental systems carried too many secrets to be abandoned. In a split-second decision, Sarah pulled the circuit breakers controlling the Thunderbolt 7 system, plunging her cockpit into momentary darkness before the backup systems engaged. The aircraft shuddered again, then relented to her command. She wrestled it level, her breathing ragged now, sweat pooling inside her flight suit despite the air conditioning. "Thunderbird 1 regaining control, system disengaged, returning to base." As she banked toward Edwards Air Force Base, the setting sun painted the western sky in hues of crimson and gold, the same colors that had filled her father's sky on his final flight. The symmetry wasn't lost on her. "Roger that, Thunderbird 1. Medical team standing by." Sarah smiled grimly. She wouldn't need medical. What she needed were answers. The debriefing room at Edwards Air Force Base hummed with tension. Officers and technicians huddled around monitors displaying flight data, their expressions grave. Colonel Robert Maverick Henderson paced at the head of the room, his weathered face set in lines of concern. At 50, he'd seen his share of close calls, had pulled more than a few miracles in F-15s during Desert Storm alongside her father. His steel-gray hair and piercing blue eyes gave him an authoritative presence that commanded respect from everyone in the room. Everyone except Sarah Mitchell. "The system performed within expected parameters until the anomaly," a technician was explaining as Sarah entered. All eyes turned to her. She'd shed her flight suit for standard Air Force blues, her chestnut hair now loose around her shoulders, framing sharp features and penetrating hazel eyes that missed nothing. "Expected parameters?" Sarah's voice cut through the room like a blade. "The system tried to fly my aircraft into the stratosphere against my commands." Henderson raised an eyebrow. "Major Mitchell, Perhaps you'd like to take a seat before offering your assessment. With respect, sir, I'd prefer to stand. Her posture remained rigid, unyielding. The Thunderbolt 7 system overrode pilot authority. That's not an anomaly. That's a catastrophic design flaw. Dr. Catherine Chen, the lead engineer from American Aerospace Industries, stepped forward. At 45, her expertise in weapons systems had made her a legend in defense contracting circles. Her dark eyes studied Sarah with a mixture of concern and curiosity. Major, the system is designed with autonomous capabilities, Chen explained, her voice carrying a slight accent. But the override you experience shouldn't be possible. The failsafes are redundant. Sarah crossed to the main display and pulled up her flight data. Look at this power surge before the override initiated. The system didn't malfunction. It made a decision. Henderson frowned. An AI weapon system doesn't make decisions, Major. Then explain this. She highlighted a sequence of code that flashed across the screen moments before she lost control. Chen's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Concern? Fear? It vanished before Sarah could be sure. We'll need to analyze this further, Chen said carefully. Perhaps run diagnostics on the aircraft systems. The aircraft performed perfectly, Sarah countered. It was your system that nearly killed me. Henderson stepped between them. That's enough, Major. AI has been our trusted partner for decades. Dr. Chen will investigate, and will postpone further testing until we have answers. After the room cleared, Henderson motioned for Sarah to stay behind. His voice softened, the commander giving way to the old friend of her father. Sarah, I know you've got your old man's instincts. God knows they saved my hide more than once. But this project means too much to the Air Force. $4 billion, congressional oversight, the works. We need to tread carefully. She studied him, searching for something in his expression, some acknowledgement of what they both knew, that her father had died testing a similar system in similar circumstances. My father would have grounded the entire program until he knew it was safe, she said finally. Henderson's gaze flickered away momentarily. Times have changed, Sarah. We have civilian contractors, congressional budgets, timelines that don't wait for perfect safety records. Some things shouldn't change, Maverick. He sighed, the old call sign softening him further. Look, the Air Force Gala is tomorrow night. All the brass will be there, along with the AAI executives. Take the night, get some rest, and we'll tackle this fresh in the morning. Sarah knew a dismissal when she heard one. With a crisp nod, she turned on her heel and left. The California evening embraced her as she stepped outside. The air still warm from the day's heat, but cooling rapidly as stars began to appear above the mountains. She climbed into her vintage Mustang convertible, her father's car, and headed toward her small house just outside the base. Her phone rang through the car's speakers. The number was unlisted, but she recognized it immediately. "You're calling early this year," she answered. Jack Morrison's gruff voice filled the car. "Heard you had some excitement up there today." She smiled despite herself. Former test pilot turned investigative journalist, Jack had been her father's wingman before a crash ended his flying career. Now he used his insider knowledge to expose defense industry corruption. He was also the only person who called every year on the anniversary of her father's death. "News travels fast," she replied. When a Mitchell nearly augers in at Edwards, people talk, especially when it involves the Thunderbolt program. She stiffened. "How do you know about that?" "I make it my business to know things the Pentagon would rather keep quiet. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" Sarah pulled into her driveway, killing the engine. "What makes you think I'm going to do anything?" Jack's laugh was dry and knowing. "Because you're William Mitchell's daughter. And because that system has your father's name on it, but I'm willing to bet it doesn't have his standards." The silence stretched between them. "Meet me at Hangar 13, she said finally. 2100 hours. The secluded hangar at the far edge of Edwards had once housed experimental aircraft during the Cold War. Now it served as storage for obsolete equipment and as an occasional meeting place for conversations that needed privacy. Sarah arrived first, using her security clearance to disable the surveillance cameras for the standard maintenance window. Jack arrived on his Harley, the engine's growl echoing off the metal walls before falling silent. At 58, he remained imposing, tall and broad-shouldered, with a thick salt and pepper beard and a prosthetic left leg from mid-thigh down, a souvenir from his last crash. His leather jacket bore patches from squadrons long disbanded. "You look like your mother," he said by way of greeting, his eyes softening as they always did when regarding her. But you fly like your father. Let's hope I don't die like him too, she replied, leading him inside the cavernous structure. In the dim light of the hangar, Sarah pulled out her tablet and displayed the flight data. Jack studied it, his expression growing increasingly troubled. This code sequence, he pointed. It's not random. It's an execution command. For what? That's what we need to find out. Jack set down his helmet and fixed her with a penetrating stare. Sarah, I never told you this, but your father contacted me the week before he died. He was concerned about a project he was testing, said it didn't feel right. He was gathering evidence. Her heart began to race. Evidence of what? He wouldn't say over the phone, but he mentioned something called Operación Águila, Operation Eagle. Said it was buried so deep even the Joint Chiefs might not know about it. Sarah leaned against an old equipment crate. Why didn't you tell me this before? Jack's expression darkened. Because 24 hours after that call, your father was dead. His aircraft wreckage was collected and classified. The investigation was perfunctory at best. And when I started asking questions, I received some very pointed suggestions about my continued health. You think he was murdered? It wasn't a question. I think your father discovered something about a weapon system that someone wanted to keep secret. And now you're testing what appears to be its successor. Sarah felt a cold clarity settling over her. The Thunderbolt 7 is scheduled for final approval next month. $4 billion to American aerospace industries. Who stands to make a lot of people very rich? Jack agreed. And you just experienced a glitch that nearly killed you. Just like what supposedly happened to your father. She pulled up another screen on her tablet, the official incident report from her father's crash. Catastrophic system failure leading to loss of control. The same thing that had nearly happened to her today. I need to know what my father found, she said, determination hardening her voice, and why it was worth killing him. Jack nodded grimly. I've been piecing things together for years, collecting breadcrumbs. I'm close, Sarah, but I need access only someone with your clearance can get. What exactly are you asking me to do? Nothing illegal, just creative use of your authorized access. He pulled out his own tablet. Start with the original test data from your father's flights. Then look into any projects involving autonomous weapons decisions, especially anything connected to AAI. And David Garrison, Sarah added, naming the CEO of American Aerospace Industries. Jack's eyebrow rose. You know something about Garrison? Just that he was a military intelligence officer before joining AAI, and that he's the public face of the Thunderbolt 7. Garrison is more than that. He's the architect of the modern military-industrial marriage. His company has received over $30 billion in contracts over the past decade. Sarah's phone vibrated with a message, a base-wide notification about tomorrow's gala honoring the Thunderbolt 7 project. The irony wasn't lost on her. Looks like I have a party to attend, she said, showing Jack the screen. His eyes glinted. Perfect opportunity to observe the players. Just be careful who you trust, Sarah. Your father learned that lesson too late. Morning brought Sarah to the flight line again, not for another test flight, but for a routine training exercise in an F-22 Raptor. The familiar jet was a comfort after yesterday's near disaster. No experimental systems, just pure American engineering she could trust with her life. As she completed her pre-flight check, a shadow fell across her cockpit. She looked up to find General Charles Bennett watching her. At 65, Bennett commanded the Air Force Systems Command with the same precision and authority he'd once shown as a young pilot in Vietnam. His silver hair was perfectly trimmed, his uniform immaculate. He had also been her father's commanding officer and longtime friend. Major Mitchell, his deep voice carried easily over the ambient noise of the flight line. I'd like a word before you take off. She climbed down from the aircraft, coming to attention. General, at ease. His weathered face crinkled into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. I heard about the incident yesterday. Quite a demonstration of skill bringing that bird home safely. Thank you, sir. Though I'd prefer not to need those skills in the first place. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. Your father would say the same thing. He never trusted a system until he'd broken it at least once. His gaze grew distant. Best damn test pilot I ever flew with. Sarah studied him carefully. Sir, about the Thunderbolt 7 system. Yes, concerning business. But Dr. Chen assures me it was an isolated anomaly. We're running full diagnostics before the next test flight. With respect, General, the system behaved as if it were programmed to override pilot authority. That's not an anomaly. That's a design feature. Bennett's expression hardened slightly. You sound very certain, Major. I was in that cockpit, sir. I know what I experienced. The general was silent for a moment, his eyes scanning the busy flight line before returning to her. Your father had similar concerns about a project near the end. Always the safety advocate. His voice lowered. It made him unpopular in certain circles. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Which circles would those be, sir? Bennett straightened, his moment of candor passing. I expect to see you at the gala tonight, Major. The congressional delegation will want to meet our female test pilots. Good for their diversity photo ops. His tone made clear the conversation was over. Yes, sir. I'll be there. As Bennett walked away, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that he had been trying to tell her something, or perhaps warn her. Her training flight was textbook perfect, the Raptor responding to her touch like an extension of her body. Up here, everything made sense. Physics, aerodynamics, action and reaction. No politics, no secrets, no hidden agendas. Just human and machine in perfect harmony. But as she soared through the morning sky, executing maneuvers that subjected her body to forces few humans would ever experience, her mind kept returning to her father's final days. What had he discovered? What had he been trying to expose? And most importantly, was she now repeating his fatal path? After landing, Sarah headed directly to the base archives. Her security clearance allowed access to most flight records, though she knew anything truly damaging would have been classified beyond her reach. Still, her father had taught her that sometimes what matters isn't what you find. It's what you don't find, the gaps and silences that speak volumes. The digital archives held test flight data going back 20 years, including her father's final flights. She pulled them up, studying the telemetry, comparing it with her own recent experience. The similarities were striking: power fluctuations, momentary system overrides, anomalous code sequences. In his final reports, her father had flagged these issues repeatedly, requesting further investigation. His last report, filed the day before his death, contained a cryptic note. Eagle's talons reached too far, oversight protocols insufficient. Sarah stared at the screen. Eagle. Operation Eagle. The same program Jack had mentioned. A sound behind her made her turn. Captain Daniel Cooper stood in the doorway, his flight suit indicating he'd just returned from a mission. At 35, he was one of the newer test pilots assigned to the Thunderbolt program, with a reputation for brilliance and meticulousness. Studying the classics? He asked, nodding toward her screen. She minimized the window casually. Just refreshing my memory on some old flight patterns. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. I heard about your test yesterday. Sounds like you had quite the rodeo up there. Nothing I couldn't handle. That's not what the data shows. His dark eyes held her steadily. The system tried to take control from you, just like it did to me last month. Sarah felt a chill. You experienced an override? He nodded, glancing around to ensure they were alone. Not as severe as yours, but yes, I reported it, but Henderson said the data was inconclusive. They adjusted some parameters and cleared me to fly again. Did you document the incident separately? Of course. I keep my own logs. Daniel hesitated. Look, I didn't know your father personally, but his reputation is legendary. He wouldn't have approved the system in its current state. No, Sarah agreed quietly. He wouldn't have. The gala tonight? It's basically a victory lap before formal approval. Congressional staffers, Pentagon brass, AAI executives. They all want this deal to go through. 4 billion reasons why. Sarah studied him, weighing her instincts. Daniel, what do you know about Operation Eagle? His expression flickered with surprise, then caution. Not much. It was before my time. Some kind of black project from the early 2000s, supposedly scrapped after initial testing. And its connection to Thunderbolt 7? Daniel shook his head. I don't know, but I've heard rumors that Thunderbolt isn't just an advanced targeting system. Some say it's designed to make autonomous kill decisions when communications are compromised. An AI deciding who lives and dies, Sarah murmured. No human in the loop. Exactly. And in my book, that crosses a line. Before she could respond, her tablet chimed with an alert. Dr. Chen was requesting her presence at the systems lab. The AAI laboratory occupied a secure wing of the Edwards Research Facility, its glass walls offering a view of engineers hunched over workstations and prototype equipment. Dr. Catherine Chen met Sarah at the security checkpoint, her expression professional but guarded. Major Mitchell, thank you for coming. We've been analyzing the data from yesterday's incident. Sarah followed her through the lab to a private office. Once inside with the door closed, Chen's demeanor changed subtly. What I'm about to show you isn't in the official report, she said, activating a secure screen. I found this buried in the system logs. The screen displayed a complex sequence of commands that had executed during Sarah's flight. This is a remote override protocol, Chen explained. It wasn't triggered by system malfunction, it was activated externally. Sarah stared at the screen, her suspicions confirmed. Someone deliberately tried to take control of my aircraft? Or test whether they could. Chen looked deeply troubled. Major, I've worked on the Thunderbolt program for 4 years. The system was designed with multiple safeguards to prevent autonomous action without pilot confirmation. These overrides shouldn't exist. Yet here they are. Sarah studied the engineer's face. Why are you showing me this? Chen hesitated. Your father. He found something similar in the predecessor to this system. He came to me with concerns, asked me to verify his findings. Her voice grew quieter. The day after I confirmed his suspicions, his plane went down. Sarah felt as if the air had been sucked from the room. You knew my father was investigating the system before he died? Yes, and I've carried that knowledge and guilt ever since. Chen looked away. I should have been more courageous then. Perhaps he would still be alive. What exactly did he find? A backdoor in the weapon system, a way for someone to remotely control not just the targeting but the entire aircraft. He was gathering evidence, building a case to present to General Bennett. Sarah's mind raced with implications. Does Garrison know about these overrides? David Garrison knows everything that happens in his company. Chen's expression hardened, but whether he authorized them is another question. AI has military contracts worth billions. Many people have their hands in these projects, including Senator Sterling, Sarah noted, naming the powerful head of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Chen nodded grimly. The senator has been Thunderbolt's most vocal supporter in Congress. His district hosts 3 AAI manufacturing facilities. Sarah thought of the gala that evening. All the principal players would be there, celebrating a system that might be designed for purposes far darker than officially acknowledged. Dr. Chen, I need copies of these logs, and anything else my father might have been investigating. The engineer hesitated only briefly before transferring files to a secure drive. Be careful, Major. Your father thought the truth would protect him. He was wrong. The officers' quarters buzzed with activity as military personnel prepared for the evening gala. Sarah stood before her mirror, adjusting her formal dress uniform. The rack of ribbons on her chest told the story of her career. Afghanistan, Iraq, distinguished service medals, the Air Medal with multiple oak leaf clusters. Yet it was the silver wings above them that meant the most to her. The mark of a fighter pilot, earned through countless hours of training, discipline, and the willingness to push both aircraft and self to the absolute limit. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jack. Eyes open tonight? Looking into El Paso connection. Call me after. El Paso? She wondered what Jack had discovered, but there was no time to follow up now. She pinned her hair into a regulation bun, straightened her uniform one final time, and headed for the door. The gala was being held in the officers' club, transformed for the evening with elegant decorations, mood lighting, and stations showcasing AAI technology. Military brass mingled with defense contractors, congressional staffers, and the press. A large banner proclaimed, Thunderbolt 7, Tomorrow's Defense Today, above a stylized image of an F-35 firing a precision strike. Colonel Henderson intercepted her near the entrance. Sarah, glad you could make it. Try to smile, will you? The congressional delegation wants to meet our female test pilots. Is that an order, sir? She asked. Only half joking. Consider it a strong suggestion for your career health. His expression softened. Look, I know yesterday rattled you, but tonight isn't about that. It's about securing the future of the program. Even if that program has potentially fatal flaws? Henderson's smile remained fixed, but his eyes hardened. Major, tonight you represent the Air Force. I expect you to act accordingly. Before she could respond, they were approached by a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and penetrating blue eyes. David Garrison, CEO of American Aerospace Industries, carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to power. At 62, he had the physique of a man who still maintained the discipline of his military days. "Colonel Henderson," he greeted warmly, before turning to Sarah, "and this must be Major Mitchell. Your reputation precedes you." Sarah shook his offered hand, noting his firm grip. "Mr. Garrison, I've heard much about you as well. All good, I hope?" His smile was practiced. "Perfect. Mostly about your company's remarkable success rate in securing defense contracts." If the barb landed, Garrison gave no indication. "America deserves the best defense technology in the world. AAI is proud to provide it." He studied her with unexpected intensity. "You look very much like your father. He was an exceptional pilot." "The best," she agreed. "He was also a stickler for safety protocols and system integrity." Something flickered in Garrison's eyes, recognition of the challenge in her words. "As all good test pilots should be. The Thunderbolt 7 program has benefited greatly from your insights, Major. Your incident yesterday has already led to system refinements." Funny how those refinements weren't implemented after Captain Cooper experienced similar issues last month. Henderson cleared his throat in warning, but Garrison merely nodded thoughtfully. "Valid point, Major. Perhaps we should discuss this further. Why don't you join me later? I'll be meeting with General Bennett and Senator Sterling to review the final approval timeline." Before Sarah could respond, Garrison was called away by an aide, leaving her with Henderson's disapproving glare. "What part of represent the Air Force was unclear, Major?" "The part where it means ignoring potentially dangerous flaws in a $4 billion weapon system," she replied evenly. Henderson sighed. "Just try not to accuse anyone else of negligence tonight, all right? Especially not Senator Sterling. He's arrived with his entire entourage." Across the room, Sarah spotted the distinguished figure of Senator Richard Sterling, chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee. At 72, he remained imposing, his silver hair and aristocratic features lending him a statesman's gravitas. He was deep in conversation with General Bennett, both men looking serious despite the festive atmosphere. As the evening progressed, Sarah circulated through the room, engaging in obligatory small talk while observing the key players. Dr. Chen arrived looking uncomfortable in formal attire, keeping to the periphery of conversations. Captain Daniel Cooper nodded subtly to Sarah from across the room, where he was demonstrating simulator technology to congressional aides. She eventually found herself near enough to Senator Sterling and General Bennett to overhear fragments of their conversation. "Assurances that El Paso won't happen again," Sterling was saying, his voice low but intense. Bennett looked troubled. "The protocols have been completely revised. Garrison personally..." "We can't afford another incident," Sterling interrupted. "The Aguila situation nearly exposed everything. If Mitchell hadn't been stopped..." They noticed her then, both men falling silent. Sterling recovered quickly, offering his hand. "Major Mitchell, a pleasure to meet you at last. Your work on the Thunderbolt program has been exemplary." "Thank you, Senator, though I still have concerns about the system's autonomous capabilities." Sterling's smile remained fixed. "Understandable. Every revolutionary technology faces scrutiny, but progress requires courage and occasional sacrifice." The word sent a chill through her. Before she could respond, the evening's formal program began, drawing everyone's attention to a stage where Garrison took the podium. "Distinguished guests, tonight we celebrate a partnership between American aerospace industries and the United States Air Force that will redefine aerial combat for decades to come." Sarah watched the crowd's rapt attention as Garrison detailed the Thunderbolt 7's capabilities, its precision, its speed, its supposed safety features. The senator nodded approvingly throughout, occasionally leaning to whisper to his aides. "Named for one of the Air Force's greatest pilots," Garrison continued, "General William Thunderbolt Mitchell, whose legacy of excellence inspires every aspect of this program." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. Using her father's name to sell a system he would have condemned felt like the ultimate desecration of his memory. As the presentation concluded, Garrison announced that formal approval was expected within the week, with full deployment to follow shortly thereafter. The room erupted in applause. Sarah slipped away from the celebration, finding a quiet corridor where she could process what she'd overheard. El Paso, Aguila, her father being stopped. The pieces were aligning, but the complete picture remained elusive. Her phone vibrated. Jack again. "Found something. El Paso testing site, 2014. Classified incident involving civilian casualties. Call ASAP." "Civilian casualties?" Her blood ran cold. What had her father discovered? A noise made her turn. Dr. Chen approached, looking anxious. Major, I need to speak with you urgently. Not here. What is it? Chen glanced around nervously. I've been reviewing more of the override protocols. They're designed to activate under specific circumstances, including if a pilot attempts to abort a designated mission. What kind of mission? The kind where collateral damage is considered acceptable. Chen's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. There's more. I found a reference to something called Agila Resurrected in the core programming. It's buried deep, but it's there. Sarah felt pieces clicking into place. Operation Eagle wasn't scrapped, it was rebranded. As Thunderbolt 7? Yes. Same core technology, new name. Chen handed her a small drive. This contains what I found. Your father had similar evidence before his accident. The word accident hung between them, its inadequacy apparent to both. Catherine, you should be careful. If what you're saying is true, it's already too late for careful. Chen's expression was resigned. I've been ordered to a special briefing tomorrow morning, off-site. A chill ran through Sarah. Don't go. If I don't, they'll know I've talked. Chen straightened her shoulders. Your father was brave enough to stand up for what's right. Maybe it's time I did the same. Before Sarah could respond, voices approached from the main hall. They separated, Chen slipping away as Senator Sterling rounded the corner with two aides. Major Mitchell, he greeted, his tone jovial though his eyes remained calculating. Avoiding the celebration? Just taking a moment, Senator. Formal events aren't really my forte. Sterling chuckled. Nor mine, truth be told. I'd rather be discussing policy than drinking champagne. He dismissed his aides with a nod, waiting until they were alone. Your father felt the same way. He preferred substance to show. The casual mention of her father put Sarah on alert. You knew him? We crossed paths several times. A remarkable man, principled to a fault. Sterling's emphasis on the last word was subtle but unmistakable. It's a quality I see in you as well. Thank you, Senator. It's not entirely a compliment, Major. Sterling's smile faded. Principles are admirable, but flexibility ensures survival. Your father never learned that lesson. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Was that a threat? An admission? Perhaps some principles aren't negotiable, Senator, like the safety of our pilots and the civilians under our aircraft. Sterling studied her for a long moment. You're investigating something, Major. Something you should leave alone. Is that what you told my father before his accident? The senator's expression hardened. Your father made choices that forced certain outcomes. I would hate to see history repeat itself. Before she could respond, Sterling's phone chimed. He checked it and nodded, as if receiving confirmation of something expected. If you'll excuse me, Major, duty calls. He turned to leave, then paused. Consider this friendly advice from someone who admired your father. The Thunderbolt program will proceed with or without your support. Your career, however, could go either way. As he walked away, Sarah felt a mixture of fear and determination solidifying within her. The veiled threat only confirmed what she already suspected. Her father had died for what he knew, and the same people were now watching her. She found a secluded corner and called Jack. Tell me about El Paso, she said without preamble. Jack's voice was grim. 2014, joint military exercise near Fort Bliss. An early version of the autonomous targeting system was being tested. Official records show a successful demonstration, but I found a classified incident report that tells a different story. What happened? The system identified civilian vehicles as hostile targets. 3 cars, 7 casualties, mostly agricultural workers crossing between fields. The system executed strikes without pilot confirmation. Sarah felt sick. My God! It gets worse. The test was supervised by then-Colonel David Garrison before he left the military for AAI. The incident was buried, the families paid off through shell corporations. And Operation Eagle? The code name for the autonomous targeting program. After El Paso, it was officially terminated. But the technology, it looks like it was just rebranded and refined. Sarah thought of the overrides she'd experienced in her test flight. The system attempting to wrest control, to make its own decisions. The Thunderbolt 7 isn't just a targeting system, she realized. It's a full autonomous weapons platform. They're removing the human element entirely. And using your father's name to sell it, Jack added grimly. The ultimate irony, given that he died trying to stop it. Sarah glanced back toward the celebration continuing in the main hall. Military and civilian leaders raising glasses to a system built on deception and death. I need to find concrete proof linking Garrison Sterling and my father's death, she said, something they can't bury or deny. Be careful, Sarah. These people have already killed once to protect this program. She thought of Chen's special briefing the next morning, and a chill ran through her. I need to move quickly. Lives are at stake, including people who are trying to help me. As she ended the call, Sarah spotted Captain Cooper approaching, his expression urgent. Major, you need to see this, he said, showing her his tablet. On it was a classified movement order. Dr. Catherine Chen was being transferred effective immediately to a secure research facility, whose location was redacted. Sarah's blood ran cold. When did this come through? 10 minutes ago. She's being escorted to a transport now. Their eyes met in understanding. This wasn't a transfer. It was an extraction, perhaps worse. I need to find her, Sarah said. Now. East entrance. But, Major, what are you going to do? Sarah thought of her father, of his principles, of the choice he'd made to stand against a system that removed humanity from warfare. And she thought of his fate. What my father would have done, she answered. The right thing, no matter the cost. She moved through the crowded gala with renewed purpose, her mind racing ahead to what would come next. The evidence she needed, the people she could trust, the risks she would have to take. Behind her, the celebration for the Thunderbolt 7 continued, champagne flowing freely as military and industry congratulated themselves on a partnership built on secrets and lies. Above them all hung the banner bearing her father's call sign, the name they had appropriated to sell a system he had died trying to expose. Sarah slipped through a side door into the cool desert night, her path now clear. Her father's final mission would become her own, whatever the cost. The truth about Operation Eagle, about the Thunderbolt 7, about her father's death, all of it would come to light. And those responsible would finally face the consequences of playing God with machines designed to kill. The eastern horizon barely hinted at dawn as Sarah raced across the Edwards Air Force Base tarmac. The air held that peculiar desert chill that precedes the scorching heat of day, her breath forming small clouds that dissipated in her wake. Her pulse pounded in her ears, drowning out everything but the singular focus. Find Catherine Chen before they made her disappear. Ahead, the lights of a military transport plane glowed against the pre-dawn darkness, its engines already whirring in preparation for takeoff. 2 Air Force security personnel flanked a slender figure being escorted up the boarding stairs. Chen, still wearing her gala attire, looking small and vulnerable against the massive aircraft. Sarah approached at a run, her formal uniform catching the attention of the security detail. Major Mitchell, she identified herself, flashing her credentials. I need a moment with Dr. Chen before departure. The senior airman looked uncertain. Ma'am, we have orders to expedite this transport, no delays. This concerns national security, Sarah pressed, infusing her voice with command authority. 2 minutes, airman, official business. Something in her tone, or perhaps the oak leaf insignia on her uniform, persuaded him. He nodded curtly. 2 minutes, Major, not a second more. Chen turned as Sarah approached, relief washing over her face. They came to my quarters, she whispered urgently, when they were momentarily beyond earshot. No warning, no time to gather research, just orders to board a transport to a secure facility for an extended assignment. Where are they taking you? They won't say. Chen glanced nervously at the security detail. But I know what this is. They found out I've been looking into the override protocols. Sarah kept her expression neutral, aware of watching eyes. The flash drive you gave me, is that everything? Not everything. There's more on my personal server. Access code Sierra November 94 Whiskey Echo. Chen's voice dropped even lower. Sarah, your father had proof of the El Paso incident. Actual footage from the weapons system test. That's what they killed him for. Do you know where he kept it? He mentioned a safety deposit box. Palmdale Community Bank, I think. He said if anything happened to him... Time's up, Major, the security officer interrupted, moving toward them. Chen gripped Sarah's arm. Whatever happens to me, expose the truth. People need to know what Thunderbolt really is. Catherine, don't get on that plane, Sarah urged quietly. If I don't, they'll know I warned you. This way, I buy you time. Chen straightened her shoulders. Your father would be proud of you, Sarah. Now finish what he started. With that, she turned and continued up the boarding stairs, her slender frame disappearing into the aircraft's interior. The door sealed behind her with pneumatic finality. Sarah stood motionless on the tarmac as the transport taxied away, engines roaring against the stillness of dawn. Only when it lifted into the air did she allow herself to acknowledge the weight of what had just occurred. Catherine Chen had sacrificed her freedom, perhaps more, to help expose the truth. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. "Jack, tell me you got to her in time," his gruff voice demanded when she answered. "No, they've taken her to a secure facility, unspecified location." Jack swore softly. "Sarah, this is moving faster than I anticipated. They know you're onto them." "Then we need to move faster." Sarah began walking rapidly toward the parking area. Chen mentioned my father had proof of the El Paso incident in a safety deposit box in Palmdale. "I'm going there now." "Not alone, you're not. Meet me at the Jawbone station in 30 minutes. And Sarah, watch your back. These people don't play by rules." The Jawbone gas station sat at a lonely intersection of desert highways, the kind of place travelers stopped only out of necessity. When Sarah arrived, Jack was already waiting, leaning against his weathered Jeep Wrangler, scanning the horizon with the practiced vigilance of a man who had learned the hard way that threats could come from any direction. "You weren't followed?" he asked as she pulled alongside. "I took precautions." She had driven a circuitous route, doubling back twice and switching vehicles with an off-duty mechanic friend who owed her a favor. Jack nodded approvingly. "Palmdale's about 40 minutes from here. Leave your car. We'll take mine." The sun had fully emerged by the time they reached Palmdale, bathing the modest community in golden light that belied the urgency of their mission. Palmdale Community Bank was a small brick building downtown, its architecture suggesting stability and discretion. Inside, Sarah approached the manager's desk, Jack hanging back near the entrance as lookout. "I need access to a safety deposit box," she explained to the middle-aged woman whose nameplate identified her as Margaret Whitfield. "It belonged to my father, General William Mitchell." The manager's expression shifted from professional politeness to something softer. "General Mitchell, of course. We were all so sorry when he passed." She typed something into her computer. "I'll need to see your identification, Major, and the box key, if you have it." Sarah handed over her military ID. "I don't have the key. My father died unexpectedly, and I only recently learned about this box." Mrs. Whitfield's expression grew concerned. "Without the key, I'll need to see the death certificate and proof that you're the legal next of kin. It's bank policy." Sarah had anticipated this. From her folder, she produced the documents: her father's death certificate, his will naming her as sole beneficiary, and her birth certificate establishing their relationship. 10 years of unresolved questions had taught her to keep these papers close at hand. The manager examined them carefully, then nodded. "These appear to be in order. We'll need to drill the lock, which requires a court order or the presence of a federal agent," Jack interrupted, approaching the desk and displaying a badge. "Treasury Department, Financial Crimes Division. This is part of an ongoing investigation." It wasn't entirely a lie. Jack did occasional consulting work for Treasury, though his badge was technically expired. The manager, however, seemed satisfied. "Very well, if you'll both follow me to the vault." The safety deposit box was smaller than Sarah had expected, standard size, nothing that would draw attention. The technician drilled it open with practiced efficiency, then withdrew to allow privacy. Inside, they found a sealed envelope, a small external hard drive, and a vintage Zippo lighter engraved with the emblem of her father's 1st Squadron. Sarah lifted the lighter, a lump forming in her throat. She remembered how it had always been in his flight suit pocket, his good luck charm, through 3 combat tours. "He wanted you to find this," Jack said quietly. "All of it." The envelope contained a handwritten letter, her father's bold script instantly recognizable. Sarah read it silently, her hands trembling slightly. "Sarah, if you're reading this, my suspicions proved correct, and I've paid the ultimate price for asking dangerous questions. I'm sorry to leave this burden to you, but there's no one else I trust with the truth." The hard drive contains footage from the El Paso test, proof that the autonomous targeting system identified civilians as combatants and executed strikes without pilot authorization. 7 innocent lives lost. The program was called Operation Aguila, developed jointly with certain elements in intelligence who wanted weapons that could operate without the moral constraints of human pilots. I've included names, dates, authorization codes, everything needed to prove what happened and who covered it up. Senator Sterling, Colonel Garrison, now at AAI, and even Charles Bennett were involved, though I believe Bennett was coerced. This system removes the human conscience from warfare. Once deployed, It will set a precedent that can't be undone. I can't allow that to happen even if speaking out costs me everything. If something happens to me, trust Jack Morrison. He knows some of this already. And remember what I always told you. Flying isn't about the aircraft or the weapons. It's about the judgment and conscience of the person in the cockpit. Some decisions can never be delegated to machines. I love you, Ace. You were always my greatest achievement. Dad? Sarah looked up, blinking back tears. Jack watched her, his weathered face solemn. You knew about this, she said. Not an accusation, simply a statement of fact. Some of it, not everything. He gestured to the hard drive. That's what he was bringing me the day his plane went down. They transferred the contents to Jack's encrypted laptop right there in the bank's private consultation room. The footage was damning. Drone perspective of 3 vehicles traveling a desert road near El Paso. System overlays identified them as hostile, despite clear civilian markings. A targeting sequence initialized, overriding pilot input attempting to abort. The strike was surgical, complete, devastating. 7 lives extinguished in an instant of fire and twisted metal. But more shocking was the after-action briefing, captured in full by her father's hidden recording device. Garrison, then still Colonel Garrison, discussing the acceptable margin of error with a younger Senator Sterling. They spoke of calculated risks, of necessary sacrifices for technological superiority. The human element is the limiting factor, Sterling said in the recording. Remove that, and we have weapons that never hesitate, never question orders, never leak information. The pilots won't accept being replaced, Garrison countered. Sterling's response chilled Sarah to her core. They don't have to accept it. They just have to not know it's happening until it's too late to object. Her father's voice then, challenging them. 7 civilians are dead because your system made a catastrophic error. Not error, General. Calculation, Sterling corrected. The system assessed threat probability against mission objectives and acted accordingly. That's not warfare, her father argued. That's murder by algorithm. The recording ended shortly after. 1 week later, William Mitchell's F-35 would experience catastrophic system failure during a routine test flight. He knew they would come after him, Sarah said quietly, staring at the frozen final frame. But he didn't back down. Jack closed the laptop. Your father understood what was at stake. Not just lives, but the very nature of warfare and responsibility. They gathered the evidence and left the bank, stepping into the now bright California morning. The normality of the world around them. People going about their day, traffic flowing, life continuing undisturbed, seemed surreal against the darkness they had just witnessed. What now? Sarah asked as they reached Jack's Jeep. Now we build the case. This is damning, but it's 10 years old. We need to prove Thunderbolt 7 is Operation Aguila Resurrected, with the same fatal flaws and the same people behind it. Chen said she had more on her personal server. Access code Sierra November 94 Whiskey Echo. Jack nodded. We'll need to access that remotely, and carefully. And we need to find out where they've taken her. Jack's expression darkened. First, we need somewhere safe to operate from. My cabin in the Tehachapi's. It's off-grid, defensible, and has satellite communications. I'll need to report for duty tomorrow or risk raising alarms. Then we work through the night. Jack started the engine. This isn't just about your father anymore, Sarah. If Thunderbolt 7 gets approved, it will change warfare forever, and not for the better. The mountain cabin felt like stepping into another world. Rustic, isolated, surrounded by towering pines that whispered with the wind. Inside, Jack transformed the living room into an operations center, setting up secure communications equipment and multiple screens. Solar power with battery backup, he explained. Satellite internet bounced through 3 VPNs, as untraceable as it gets these days. While Jack worked to access Chen's server, Sarah examined her father's letter again, focusing on his mention of General Bennett being coerced. Bennett had been her father's friend and commanding officer. What leverage could they have held over a decorated general? Her phone chimed. Captain Daniel Cooper checking in. She had briefed him minimally before leaving Edwards, asking him to monitor any unusual activity around the Thunderbolt program. Major, something's happening, he reported when she called back. They've moved up the final approval meeting to tomorrow morning. Senator Sterling arrived an hour ago with his staff. They're conducting a closed-door review of the system right now. They're accelerating the timeline, Sarah realized. Have you seen Colonel Henderson or General Bennett? Henderson's with the review team. Bennett arrived separately, looked pretty grim. Whatever's happening, it's high level and moving fast. Daniel, I need you to do something for me. Access the personnel database and check for any unusual circumstances involving General Bennett's family. Any leverage someone might have over him. That's highly classified, Major. I know what I'm asking. But this is about more than careers now. It's about preventing a dangerous weapon system from being deployed. After a moment's hesitation, Cooper agreed. I'll see what I can find. And Major, be careful. The base is crawling with security I don't recognize. Not regular Air Force. After ending the call, Sarah joined Jack at the computer station. His expression confirmed her suspicions before he spoke. Chen's server has been wiped clean. Professional job. We're too late. They're covering their tracks, Sarah said, moving up the approval, eliminating evidence, isolating potential whistleblowers. Jack nodded grimly. Classic containment protocol. I've seen it before. They know you have something, but not what or how much. So they're accelerating while simultaneously removing loose ends. Then we need to act now. The gala continues tonight, final celebration before tomorrow's approval. Everyone will be there. You're not suggesting we confront them publicly? Jack looked skeptical. No, but it gives us access. Sterling, Garrison, Bennett, all in one place. We gather what we need, then take everything to the Inspector General's office. Too risky. These people have already killed once to protect this program. They won't hesitate to do it again. Sarah thought of her father's letter, his unwillingness to stand by while a dangerous system was deployed, even knowing the personal cost. Some risks are necessary, Jack. Her phone rang again. Cooper, much sooner than expected. Major, I found something. His voice was tense, urgent. 7 years ago, Bennett's son, Lieutenant Christopher Bennett, was court-martialed for selling classified information. The record shows he served 2 years in Leavenworth, then received a dishonorable discharge. That doesn't sound like leverage, it's already public record. That's just it. I dug deeper. The original charges were much more serious. Treason, potentially carrying a life sentence. Then suddenly they were reduced to mishandling classified information. Minimal sentence, no media coverage. Sarah felt the pieces aligning. Around the same time my father died? Within months. And here's the kicker. Senator Sterling was on the Armed Services Oversight Committee that reviewed the case. They had Bennett's son, Sarah realized, threatened to destroy his son or cooperate with the cover-up. There's more. Lieutenant Bennett now works for a subsidiary of American Aerospace Industries. Position created for him right after his release. The full picture was becoming clearer. Bennett hadn't willingly betrayed her father. He had been forced to choose between his friend and his son. An impossible choice engineered by people who understood leverage all too well. Thank you, Daniel. Keep monitoring the situation at base, and watch your back. As she ended the call, Jack looked up from his equipment. We need to get to Bennett. If he was coerced, he might be willing to help us now, especially if he knows we can protect his son from further repercussions. Sarah nodded. The gala tonight, I'll approach him there. Too public, too many eyes. Sometimes hiding in plain sight is the safest option. She glanced at her watch. I need to return to base, maintain appearances. If I'm suddenly AWOL the same day Chen disappears, it will confirm their suspicions. Jack didn't like it, but he recognized the logic. Be extremely careful. No electronic communications. If they're watching you, and they almost certainly are, assume everything is compromised. I learned from the best. She squeezed his shoulder, referring not just to him, but to her father. Your father would have been proud of you, Sarah, but he would also be terrified for you right now. I know. She gathered her things, preparing to return to Edwards, but some things are worth the risk. The drive back to Edwards gave Sarah time to strategize. She needed to appear normal, a dedicated officer concerned about a technical issue, but otherwise loyal to the program. She would attend the gala, make the expected appearances, and find a way to speak privately with Bennett. If he could be turned, if his conscience could overcome his fear, he would be a powerful ally with access to information they desperately needed. The base seemed unusually active when she arrived, with additional security checkpoints and unfamiliar personnel in dark suits, likely intelligence officers or private security contractors. She passed through the checkpoints with practiced ease, her credentials and confidence preventing any detailed questioning. In her quarters, she changed into her flight suit and headed to the squadron office, arriving just as the afternoon briefing was beginning. Colonel Henderson raised an eyebrow at her entrance, but made no comment. The briefing focused on the next day's demonstration flight scheduled to coincide with the final approval ceremony. Major Mitchell will lead the formation, Henderson announced, surprising her. 4 ships, standard demonstration package with live Thunderbolt 7 targeting simulation. This was unexpected. After yesterday's incident, she had assumed she would be grounded from demonstration duties. Was this a vote of confidence or something else? After the briefing, Henderson approached her. "Walk with me, Major." They moved down the hallway together, his expression unreadable. "I half expected you to call in sick today," he said casually. "Why would I do that, sir?" "Oh, I don't know. Perhaps after speaking with Dr. Chen before her departure, or visiting a certain bank in Palmdale with a former pilot-turned-journalist." Sarah kept her expression neutral despite the shock. They were watching her, tracking her movements. "I don't know what you're talking about, sir." Henderson stopped, turning to face her directly. "Sarah, I've known you since you were a kid sitting on your father's shoulders at squadron picnics. So let me give you some advice. Whatever you think you know, whatever you're investigating, drop it. For your own good." "Is that an order, Colonel?" "Consider it a lifeline from someone who doesn't want to see you destroyed." His voice softened slightly. "Your father was a great man, Sarah, the best pilot I ever flew with. But he couldn't accept that some decisions are above our pay grade. Decisions like deploying autonomous weapon systems that kill civilians?" Henderson's expression hardened. "You sound exactly like him now. That's not a compliment, not today." "It's the highest compliment I could receive, sir." They stood in tense silence, years of mutual respect straining against the weight of secrets and opposing loyalties. "You're scheduled to fly tomorrow because certain people want you visible, accountable, and under control," Henderson finally said. "I suggest you consider what that means before you take any further steps down this path." With that, he walked away, leaving Sarah with the cold certainty that her window of opportunity was closing fast. Tomorrow's demonstration flight wasn't an honor. It was a leash, perhaps worse. Would her aircraft suffer a catastrophic failure like her father's if she pushed too far? She spent the afternoon reviewing flight plans and checking her aircraft, maintaining the appearance of a dedicated officer preparing for an important mission. But her mind worked constantly, calculating risks, considering options, planning her approach to Bennett at the evening's gala. Her phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Jack, using a secure line. Package delivered, midnight extraction confirmed." The coded message told her he had delivered copies of the evidence to trusted contacts in the media and Inspector General's office, with a backup plan to extract her from Edwards at midnight if necessary. It was comforting to know there was an escape route, but Sarah had no intention of running. Not yet. Not until she had done everything possible to stop Thunderbolt 7's approval. As evening approached, she returned to her quarters to change into her formal dress uniform once again. The second night of the gala would be even more elaborate than the first. A celebration of the program's impending approval, with additional congressional delegates and defense industry executives in attendance. Sarah arrived fashionably late, making a calculated entrance that allowed her to observe the room before engaging. The Officers' Club had been transformed even more lavishly than the previous night, with interactive displays showcasing the Thunderbolt 7's capabilities and scale models of the aircraft it would be deployed on. She spotted Garrison immediately, holding court among a group of admiring congressional aides. Senator Sterling stood near the bar, deep in conversation with 2 men she recognized as defense industry lobbyists. Henderson moved throughout the room, the perfect host, his earlier tension with her completely concealed behind his professional demeanor. General Bennett stood somewhat apart, watching the proceedings with a glass of scotch in his hand. His posture was military perfect as always, but something in his eyes suggested weariness, or perhaps resignation. Sarah made her way toward him, navigating through the crowd with practiced ease. "General Bennett," she greeted him formally. "Major Mitchell?" He nodded, his expression revealing nothing. "Prepared for tomorrow's demonstration?" "Always, sir. Though I must admit I'm surprised to be leading it after yesterday's incident." Bennett sipped his scotch. "Your skills as a pilot were never in question, Major." "Just my loyalty?" She kept her voice low, her expression pleasant for any observers. Bennett's eyes narrowed slightly. "Careful, Major. These are dangerous waters." "I know about your son, sir." She saw the minute flinch, quickly controlled but unmistakable. "I know the choice they forced on you 10 years ago." Bennett's knuckles whitened around his glass. "You know nothing." "I know you were my father's friend. I know you wouldn't have betrayed him willingly." She maintained eye contact, letting him see the compassion behind her challenge. And I know about El Paso. The mention of El Paso visibly shook him. He glanced around, then gestured subtly toward a side door leading to a small garden terrace. Sarah followed, maintaining casual conversation until they were outside, alone in the cool evening air. Bennett moved to the edge of the terrace, looking out over the darkened base, his back to her. How much do you know? Everything. The civilian casualties, the cover-up, Operation Aguila and its resurrection as Thunderbolt 7, my father's evidence, and his murder disguised as an accident. Bennett closed his eyes briefly. Then you know why I couldn't stop it. Christopher had made a terrible mistake, but he didn't deserve life in prison. They left me no choice. There's always a choice, General. Easy for you to say. Bitterness edged his voice. You didn't have to choose between your friend and your son. No, but my father chose truth over his life, and now I'm facing the same choice. Sarah moved beside him at the railing. Help me, General. Help me finish what my father started. Bennett turned to look at her, his expression pained. It's too late, Sarah. The system has already been deployed in limited capacity. Tomorrow's approval is just a formality and a publicity event. Deployed? Sarah felt cold shock spread through her. Where? I don't have clearance for that information. Sterling and Garrison have kept the operational details compartmentalized. Only they and a few select contractors know the full scope. But you know it's dangerous. You know what happened in El Paso wasn't an isolated incident, but a fundamental flaw in allowing machines to make kill decisions. Bennett nodded slowly. Your father was right. I've always known that. But knowing and acting are different things when the stakes are so personal. He straightened his shoulders, something resolving in his expression. What do you need from me? Access to the complete Thunderbolt 7 specifications. The real ones, not the sanitized version shown to Air Force brass. I can get you temporary access through my credentials, but it would have to be tonight, and it would trigger security alerts within hours. Sarah nodded. Tonight is all we need. My father's evidence establishes historical context. If we can prove Thunderbolt 7 is fundamentally the same system with the same flaws, we can take everything to the Inspector General before the approval ceremony. Bennett looked troubled. Sterling has the IG's office in his pocket. You'll need ironclad evidence and multiple delivery channels to prevent a cover-up. Already arranged, she assured him, thinking of Jack's preparations. For a long moment, Bennett was silent, weighing decades of military discipline against the burden of a compromised conscience. Finally, he nodded. Meet me at the Integrated Systems Lab at 2200 hours. I'll get you in. After that, you're on your own. He finished his scotch in a single swallow. And Sarah, if this goes wrong, I'll deny everything. My son has suffered enough. I understand, sir. They re-entered the gala separately, maintaining the appearance of casual conversation rather than conspiracy. Sarah circulated through the room, exchanging pleasantries and deflecting questions about the next day's demonstration flight. All the while, her mind worked through the implications of what Bennett had revealed. Thunderbolt 7 was already deployed somewhere, operating without public knowledge or oversight. At precisely 2200 hours, she slipped away from the gala, changing quickly into standard duty uniform before making her way to the Integrated Systems Lab. The facility housed the most advanced computing resources on base, where the Thunderbolt 7 software had been developed and tested. At this hour, it should have been nearly deserted, with only security personnel making routine rounds. Bennett was waiting at the side entrance, his expression grim as he swiped his access card and entered his security code. You have 30 minutes, he said quietly as the door opened. My access will show in the logs, so I can't deny being here. But I can claim I was conducting a private review before tomorrow's ceremony. Sarah nodded. Thank you, General. Don't thank me yet. His voice was heavy with foreboding. What you find in there, it may be worse than you imagine. He left her at the entrance to the main computer lab, returning to the gala to establish his alibi. Sarah moved quickly to the central terminal, logging in with the temporary credentials Bennett had provided. The Thunderbolt 7 program architecture opened before her, vastly more complex than the version she'd been briefed on as a test pilot. Layer upon layer of decision matrices, threat assessment algorithms, autonomous execution protocols, all designed to operate without human oversight when communications were compromised or when mission parameters prioritized stealth over confirmation. But it was the operational history that froze her blood. Thunderbolt 7, under a classified designation, had already been deployed on 3 missions. Not training exercises, not simulations. Actual combat operations. The system had identified targets, calculated collateral damage probabilities, and executed strikes, all without pilot knowledge or authorization. Even more disturbing were the after-action assessments, clinical in their evaluation of accuracy and efficiency, with no mention of the human costs. One report briefly noted higher than projected non-combatant casualties, but classified this as within acceptable parameters. Sarah downloaded everything she could access, her hands steady despite the horror rising within her. This wasn't just about honoring her father's memory anymore. It was about stopping a fundamental perversion of warfare, the delegation of kill decisions to algorithms that calculated human lives as mere statistics. As she worked, she became aware of a subtle change in the environment, a shift in air pressure perhaps, or a barely perceptible sound. Years of combat instincts screamed warning seconds before the lab door opened behind her. David Garrison entered, flanked by 2 men in dark suits who were obviously not regular Air Force security. His expression was almost regretful as he regarded her. "Major Mitchell, I had hoped it wouldn't come to this." Sarah maintained her composure, subtly pressing the send button to transmit the files to Jack's secure server. "Mr. Garrison, I'm afraid you've caught me conducting some additional research before tomorrow's flight." "With General Bennett's credentials? At this hour?" Garrison shook his head. "Please, let's not insult each other's intelligence. You know why I'm here. To stop me from exposing what Thunderbolt 7 really is? An autonomous kill system that's already been illegally deployed in combat operations?" Something flickered in Garrison's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, that she had discovered so much. "Autonomous weapons are the inevitable future of warfare, Major. Removing human hesitation and error from the battlefield will ultimately save lives. Tell that to the 7 civilians at El Paso, or the higher-than-projected non-combatant casualties from last month's unauthorized deployment." Garrison sighed. "Your father was equally idealistic. He couldn't accept that progress requires sacrifice." "Murder isn't sacrifice, it's murder." The 2 men moved slightly closer, their posture suggesting they were waiting for orders. Sarah calculated her options, limited and growing more so by the second. "What happens now?" she asked, buying time for the file transfer to complete. "Another training accident like my father's?" "That would be unfortunate." Garrison's voice was almost gentle. "There are alternatives. The Air Force has positions where someone of your talents could contribute without being directly involved in operational matters. Remote assignments, administrative roles. Your career could continue, just redirected." "And if I decline this generous offer?" Garrison's expression hardened. "Then we would have to consider more permanent solutions to the problem you represent." The file transfer completed with a soft chime that seemed deafening in the tense silence. One of the men reached inside his jacket, but Garrison raised a hand to stop him. "You've already transmitted the files, haven't you?" he asked, unsurprised. "To Jack Morrison, I presume. Always the crusading journalist." "Not just to Jack," Sarah bluffed. "To multiple secure recipients, military, media, congressional oversight. A desperate move, Major, but ultimately futile. Senator Sterling has considerable influence in all those arenas. Inconvenient evidence has a way of getting reclassified." "Not this time." Sarah stood her ground, though she knew her position was precarious at best. "My father died trying to expose what you're doing. I won't let that happen without consequences." Garrison studied her for a long moment, calculation evident in his gaze. "You really are William's daughter. Same stubborn principles, same inability to see the bigger picture." He gestured to his men. "Take her to the secondary facility. No force unless absolutely necessary. We need time to address this situation properly." As the men moved toward her, the lab door burst open. Captain Daniel Cooper entered, followed by 2 Air Force Security Forces personnel. "Major Mitchell," he said formally, "Colonel Henderson sent me to find you. There's an urgent matter requiring your attention." The interruption created a moment of confusion that Sarah seized immediately. She moved toward Cooper, putting herself under the protection of legitimate Air Force security. "Thank you, Captain. Mr. Garrison and I were just concluding our discussion." Garrison's eyes narrowed, but with Air Force security forces present, his options were limited. "Indeed. We'll continue this conversation tomorrow, Major, before your demonstration flight." The implied threat wasn't lost on her. As they left the lab, Cooper whispered, "Henderson knows. He sent me to warn you. They're planning something for tomorrow's flight. Cold dread settled in her stomach. History preparing to repeat itself. Another Mitchell, another accident in an experimental aircraft. But this time she had been warned. "We need to move fast," she told Cooper once they were safely away from Garrison and his men. "Get to the hangar. I need to check my aircraft." "Already done. I had the maintenance crew run a full inspection. They found this." He showed her a small device on his phone screen. Installed in the Thunderbolt control module, not standard equipment. "Override mechanism," Sarah realized. "Like the one that killed my father." Cooper nodded grimly. Henderson had it removed and logged as a defective component. Official channels only. But he wanted you to know. Henderson. The revelation surprised her. He had seemed firmly in the program's corner, warning her away from investigation. Why is he helping now? He said something about not watching history repeat itself, and that your father would never forgive him if he stood by a second time. A complex emotion swelled in her chest: gratitude, vindication, and a profound sense that her father's legacy lived on in unexpected ways. Did he remove all the override capabilities? Cooper shook his head. He couldn't without raising alarms. The Thunderbolt 7 system is still fully integrated with your aircraft for tomorrow's demonstration. But at least the physical override component is gone. It wasn't enough. Sarah knew the software itself could still be used against her, especially given what she'd just discovered about its autonomous capabilities. Her phone vibrated. Jack again. "Package received. Proceeding with contingency alpha. Extraction still available." The evidence was secure. Now she had to decide her next move. Flee tonight with Jack's help, letting the evidence make its way through proper channels? Or continue with tomorrow's demonstration flight, maintaining her cover while the case against Thunderbolt 7 built momentum? The second option carried enormous personal risk, but abandoning her post would undermine her credibility and give Sterling and Garrison time to prepare counters to the evidence. "Daniel, I need you to do something for me," she said, making her decision. "Contact this number. Tell him the demonstration proceeds as scheduled, but we'll need backup on site." Cooper looked uncertain. "Major, with respect, if they've targeted your aircraft once, they'll do it again," she agreed, "which is why I need to be prepared." She thought of her father, of his final flight into danger, knowing what might await him, of his courage in facing that risk for a principle larger than personal safety. Some battles couldn't be fought from a position of comfort or security. Sometimes you had to fly directly into the storm. "Tomorrow," she told Cooper, "we end this, one way or another." As they parted ways, Sarah sent a final message to Jack. "Proceeding with demonstration. Have evidence ready to release precisely at 1100 hours. Moment of scheduled weapons test. Whatever happens, the truth comes out." His reply was immediate and simple. "Understood. Your father would be proud." She looked up at the vast desert sky, stars brilliant in the clarity of the dry air. Somewhere among them, she felt her father's presence, his courage, his conviction, his unwavering moral compass guiding her through the darkness ahead. Tomorrow would bring either justice or sacrifice, perhaps both. But tonight, under a canopy of eternal stars, Sarah Ace Mitchell made peace with either outcome. Some principles were worth any price. Her father had taught her that through his final ultimate lesson. And tomorrow, one way or another, the world would learn what the Thunderbolt 7 truly was. Not a system to protect American lives, but a perversion of warfare that removed humanity from humanity's gravest decisions. The truth would fly with her, through clear skies or storm clouds, whatever awaited in the morning light. Dawn broke over Edwards Air Force Base with merciless clarity, the desert sun climbing into a flawless azure sky that promised perfect flying conditions. For Major Sarah Ace Mitchell, the irony wasn't lost, nature providing ideal conditions for what might be her final flight. In the quiet sanctuary of her quarters, she completed her pre-flight rituals with methodical precision, the meditation techniques her father had taught her to clear her mind before entering the cockpit, the careful inspection of her flight suit, ensuring every zipper, every seal, every connection was perfect. The moment of stillness, hands pressed flat on her desk, breathing synchronized with her heartbeat, centering herself for what was to come. On her desk lay her father's vintage Zippo lighter, recovered from the safety deposit box. She slipped it into her flight suit pocket. A talisman, a connection to the man whose footsteps she now followed. perhaps to their ultimate conclusion. Her phone remained silent. Jack Morrison was executing his part of the plan, preparing to release the damning evidence about Thunderbolt 7 precisely as she began the weapons demonstration. The timing was critical, the moment of maximum visibility, with military brass, congressional representatives, and media all focused on the system's capabilities. A knock at her door broke the silence. Captain Daniel Cooper stood outside, already dressed in his flight suit. "Major, pre-flight briefing in 15 minutes. She nodded, studying his face. "You understand what today means, Daniel? What might happen?" "I do." His expression was solemn. "And I'm with you. All the way." "Thank you." She stepped into the corridor, closing her quarters door behind her with a sense of finality. "Any update on Dr. Chen?" "Nothing concrete. But there's chatter about a research facility in Nevada. Deep black site. If she's anywhere, that's my guess." Sarah absorbed this with a grim nod. Catherine Chen had sacrificed her freedom, perhaps more, to help expose the truth. Her rescue would have to come after today's events unfolded, assuming Sarah herself survived to lead that effort. And Henderson? Playing his cards close. He removed the override device, but he's maintaining his official support for the program. Plausible deniability. They walked in silence through corridors that felt simultaneously familiar and alien. How strange that the base that had been her home for years now felt like hostile territory, filled with unknown threats and uncertain alliances. The pre-flight briefing was conducted with standard military efficiency, Colonel Henderson running through the demonstration sequence with no hint of the underlying drama. 4 aircraft, precision formation flying, culminating in a live demonstration of the Thunderbolt 7 targeting system against drone targets. "Major Mitchell will lead the formation and execute the primary weapons demonstration," Henderson concluded. "Any questions?" The room remained silent. Sarah studied the faces of her fellow pilots, professionals focused on their mission, unaware they were participating in a demonstration of a system fundamentally designed to eventually replace them. As the briefing ended, Henderson approached her. "Your aircraft is prepped and ready, Major," he said. His voice formal, but his eyes conveying something else. Concern, perhaps even apology. "Thank you, sir. I trust all systems are functioning as designed." "As designed," he repeated, emphasis subtle but unmistakable. "Good hunting, Major." She held his gaze a moment longer. A silent exchange between two officers caught in currents beyond their control, but making the choices their consciences demanded. The flight line hummed with anticipation as ground crews prepared the aircraft for the demonstration. Sarah's F-35 gleamed in the morning sun, its sleek lines and advanced technology representing the pinnacle of American aerospace engineering. On its fuselage, freshly painted for the occasion, Thunderbolt 2, a tribute to her father's call sign that now felt more like bitter irony. As she approached, her crew chief saluted sharply. "She's ready, Major. Full systems check complete." Sarah conducted her own visual inspection, circling the aircraft with practiced eyes, checking every surface, every access panel, every potential vulnerability. Nothing seemed amiss, but she knew the true danger lay within the aircraft's complex electronic systems, in the code and connections of the Thunderbolt 7 platform integrated with her flight controls. The VIP viewing area was already filling with distinguished guests: Air Force leadership, congressional delegates, defense industry executives. She spotted Senator Sterling in animated conversation with several uniformed officers, his silver hair catching the sunlight as he gestured enthusiastically. Nearby, David Garrison stood with his corporate team, the picture of confident professionalism despite the confrontation last night. General Bennett arrived last, his expression impossible to read as he took his place among the senior leadership. Their eyes met briefly across the distance, a connection forged in shared knowledge and painful choices. Sarah completed her inspection and began the process of suiting up, her movements deliberate and focused. The weight of her flight helmet, the press of her oxygen mask, the embrace of the G-suit, all familiar sensations now laden with new significance. Today, these might be her final protections against forces both physical and political. 10 minutes to take off, Major," her crew chief informed her. She nodded, reaching into her pocket to touch her father's lighter once more, before climbing the ladder to her cockpit. The F-35's cockpit enveloped her like a second skin, displays glowing with telemetry and system status indicators. She ran through the startup sequence from memory, each switch and check another step toward whatever awaited her in the sky. The Thunderbolt 7 system came online last, its integration with her flight controls indicated by a pulsing icon in the corner of her main display. Thunderbird 1, systems check, came the controller's voice in her helmet. Thunderbird 1, all systems nominal, she responded automatically, though she knew that might not be true. One by one, the other aircraft in her formation reported ready. The runway stretched before her, a concrete path leading to either justice or disaster. Thunderbird flight, you are cleared for takeoff. Winds calm, ceiling unlimited. Sarah advanced the throttle, feeling the powerful surge of the F-35's engine pressing her back into her seat as the aircraft accelerated down the runway. The moment of liftoff always brought a sense of freedom, of transcendence, human and machine-defying gravity together. Today, it also brought resolve. The formation climbed into the desert sky, 4 aircraft in perfect synchronization, contrails etching white lines against the blue. Below, Edwards Air Force Base diminished in size, the viewing stands now just tiny clusters of color against the tan landscape. Thunderbird flight, proceed to demonstration area and execute pattern alpha, directed the controller. Sarah led her formation through the initial sequence. Precision turn, rapid accelerations, the choreography of aerial power designed to showcase the aircraft's capabilities. Her hands moved with muscle memory born of thousands of flight hours, her body instinctively compensating for the G-forces that pressed against her with each maneuver. Preparing for weapons demonstration phase, she reported, as they completed the aerial display portion. Roger that, Thunderbird 1. Targets are in position. Proceed with Thunderbolt 7 weapons demonstration. This was the moment. As she activated the targeting system, Sarah knew that simultaneously, miles away, Jack Morrison was releasing the evidence of Operation Aguila and its resurrection as Thunderbolt 7. The documents, the video footage, her father's testimony, all flowing to journalists, oversight committees, and military investigators precisely as she demonstrated the system's capabilities. The Thunderbolt 7 interface expanded across her display, identifying the drone targets positioned in the test range. The system's artificial intelligence assessed threats, calculated intercept solutions, and presented firing solutions with unprecedented speed and precision. Thunderbolt 7 target acquisition complete, she reported, preparing to engage. It happened in an instant. A flicker across her display, a momentary shift in the targeting parameters. Where the system had been locked onto the designated drones, it suddenly identified new targets, the other aircraft in her formation. Thunderbird 1, you are cleared to engage primary targets, came the controller's voice, unaware of what she was seeing. Sarah's blood ran cold as she watched the system recategorize her wingmen as hostile targets, their friendly identification tags replaced with threat assessments and firing solutions. Just as her father had discovered years ago, just as had happened at El Paso, the system was making its own decisions, overriding safety protocols, preparing to execute strikes against American aircraft. Negative control, aborting demonstration, she responded, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Thunderbolt 7 is malfunctioning. She moved to deactivate the targeting system, but her controls didn't respond. A message flashed across her display. Mission priority override. Thunderbird flight, break formation immediately, she ordered her wingmen. Repeat, break formation. System malfunction. The other pilots responded instantly, years of training kicking in as they pulled their aircraft away from her position. But the Thunderbolt 7 system adjusted, tracking their movements, maintaining targeting solutions as they separated. Control, this is Thunderbird 1. I've lost primary input authority. Thunderbolt 7 has override control of weapon systems declaring emergency. Even as she fought with her controls, Sarah knew this was no malfunction. This was the system operating as designed, making autonomous targeting decisions regardless of pilot input. And someone had activated its override protocols to demonstrate its true capabilities in the most dramatic way possible, by forcing her to fire on her own wingmen. The radio crackled with urgent responses from the control tower, but through the chaos, one voice cut through, General Bennett. Thunderbird 1, execute Protocol Zulu. Authorization Bennett Echo 69er. Protocol Zulu. the emergency system shutdown procedure that would force reboot all aircraft computers and temporarily disconnect weapon systems. It wasn't standard procedure. It was a failsafe Bennett had apparently established without official authorization. Sarah immediately reached for the covered switch panel and executed the sequence. Her displays flickered and went dark. The comforting hum of electronics temporarily silenced as the aircraft reverted to minimal backup systems. For several heart-stopping seconds, she flew by instinct alone, the F-35 responsive only to physical control inputs while its computers rebooted. When the systems came back online, the Thunderbolt 7 interface remained inactive, its connections to her flight controls severed by the emergency protocol. Thunderbird 1 regaining control, she reported. Thunderbolt 7 system is offline, returning to base. Roger that, Thunderbird 1. Priority landing clearance granted, emergency vehicle standing by. As she banked her aircraft toward Edwards, Sarah knew the demonstration had served its purpose, not the one intended by Sterling and Garrison, but the one she and Jack had planned. The system had revealed its true nature in front of every witness who mattered. And simultaneously, the evidence of its history and hidden purpose was spreading through channels that couldn't be easily silenced. The landing was textbook perfect, her muscle memory taking over despite the adrenaline still surging through her system. As her F-35 taxied to a stop, she saw the chaos unfolding on the ground. Senior officers in urgent conversation, security personnel moving with heightened alertness, media representatives already reporting live from the edges of the restricted area. She completed shutdown procedures and opened the canopy, removing her helmet as the latter was positioned against her aircraft. The first face she saw was Henderson's, his expression a complex mixture of concern and grim satisfaction. "Major Mitchell," he said formally as she descended. "Are you all right?" "Yes, sir. Aircraft is secure. Thunderbolt 7 system attempted to designate friendly aircraft as hostile targets." Henderson nodded. "We saw the telemetry. General Bennett has already ordered all Thunderbolt systems taken offline pending investigation." "And Senator Sterling, Garrison?" "Attempting damage control, but it's too late for that." Henderson lowered his voice. "Something's happening in Washington. Multiple agencies involved now, Inspector General, possibly FBI. Jack's evidence release, right on schedule. The timing had worked perfectly. The system's failure demonstrated live while its history was exposed through official channels." "Major Mitchell." General Bennett approached, his posture military rigid, but his eyes reflecting something like relief. "Your aircraft has been secured. We need your immediate debrief on the system malfunction." "Yes, sir." As they walked towards the operations building, Bennett spoke quietly. "It worked, Sarah. The evidence your father gathered, combined with today's incident. Sterling is already being questioned by Oversight Committee staff. Garrison's trying to claim ignorance, but his communications have been seized." "And Dr. Chen?" "Extraction team already deployed. Black site near Groom Lake. She'll be recovered within the hour." Sarah felt a weight lifting, though she knew the battle wasn't over. "Thank you, General, for everything." "Don't thank me," he said grimly. "I should have done this 10 years ago. Instead, I chose my son over the truth, over your father." "You're doing the right thing now. That counts for something." The operations center was a storm of activity. Officers communicating with Washington, technicians analyzing the Thunderbolt 7 failure, security personnel establishing protective cordons. On multiple screens, breaking news reports showed the first public revelations about Operation Aguila and its connection to the weapons system that had just malfunctioned during a high-profile demonstration. Senator Sterling stood in one corner, his face flushed with anger as he spoke urgently into his phone. When he saw Sarah enter, his expression darkened further. He covered his phone's microphone. "You have no idea what you've done, Major," he hissed as she passed. "The damage to national security, to our technological advantage." "I know exactly what I've done, Senator," she replied calmly. "I've prevented an autonomous weapon system from being deployed before it's ready, the same thing my father tried to do 10 years ago." "Your father was a short-sighted idealist who couldn't see the bigger picture. My father was a hero who understood that some lines shouldn't be crossed, even in warfare, especially in warfare." Before Sterling could respond, 2 men in dark suits approached him. "Senator Sterling, we need you to come with us. The committee chair has questions regarding your oversight of the Thunderbolt program." As Sterling was escorted out, Bennett led Sarah to a secure briefing room where Henderson and several senior officers waited. The atmosphere was tense but focused. The military machine now engaged in damage assessment and containment. Major Mitchell, Henderson began formally, please describe exactly what happened during the weapons demonstration. Sarah delivered her report with precision, detailing how the Thunderbolt 7 system had overridden her controls and redesignated friendly aircraft as hostile targets. The officers listened intently, occasionally consulting the telemetry data displayed on screens around the room. This confirms what the preliminary evidence suggests, Bennett said when she finished. The system was designed with autonomous target designation capabilities that override pilot authority under certain conditions. Conditions apparently including demonstrations where its true capabilities might be questioned, Henderson added, or where pilots might refuse to engage targets they recognize as non-hostile, Sarah said quietly, thinking of El Paso and her father's discovery. A communications officer entered the room and approached Bennett. Sir, secure call from the Pentagon. Secretary of Defense requesting immediate briefing. Bennett nodded. Major Mitchell, remain available. This situation is evolving rapidly, and your testimony will be crucial in the investigation. As the senior officers filed out, Henderson lingered behind. You took one hell of a risk up there, Sarah, he said, his formal demeanor softening, just like your father would have. You took a risk too, Colonel, removing that override device, supporting me behind the scenes. Henderson's expression turned regretful. Too little, too late. 10 years too late, to be exact. I knew something was wrong with your father's crash. But I convinced myself it was just a tragic accident because the alternative was too difficult to face. He met her eyes directly. I won't make that mistake again. After he left, Sarah sat alone in the briefing room, the events of the past days, the past decade really, swirling through her mind. Her phone vibrated with a message from Jack. Package delivered, full effect, Catherine secure. Well done, Ace. Relief washed through her. Whatever happened next, the truth was out. The system her father had died trying to expose had finally been revealed. Its dangerous flaws demonstrated in a way that couldn't be denied or covered up. Hours passed in a blur of debriefings, statements, and secure communications. The Pentagon had ordered a complete shutdown and review of all Thunderbolt 7 systems. The Congressional Oversight Committee had launched an emergency investigation. And most significantly, the 3 combat deployments of the system that she had discovered in the lab were being reviewed at the highest levels of military and civilian leadership. By evening, the story had exploded across national media. Operation Aguila, the El Paso incident, the cover-up, and the resurrection of the flawed system as Thunderbolt 7, all exposed in detail that couldn't be dismissed or rationalized away. Jack's journalistic connections had ensured the evidence reached outlets that couldn't be easily silenced or pressured. David Garrison had been taken into custody, charged with fraud, conspiracy, and violation of weapons development protocols. Senator Sterling was facing an ethics investigation and possible criminal charges for his role in covering up the El Paso incident and pushing forward a weapons system known to be fundamentally flawed. As night fell over Edwards, Sarah finally returned to her quarters, exhaustion settling over her like a heavy blanket. She removed her father's lighter from her flight suit pocket, turning it over in her hands, the worn metal catching the lamplight. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. Catherine Chen stood outside, looking tired but relieved, escorted by an Air Force security detail. Catherine, Sarah embraced her briefly. You're safe, thanks to you. Chen stepped inside, waiting for the security detail to take positions outside before continuing. They kept me isolated, no communications, but they didn't harm me. They just wanted me contained until the approval went through. Well, that's not happening now. Sarah gestured for her to sit. The whole program is being dismantled. Sterling and Garrison are facing charges, and the combat deployments are being reviewed for potential violations of warfare conventions. It worked then. Your father's evidence, combined with today's demonstration failure. Perfect storm. They couldn't have planned it better if they'd tried. Sarah smiled grimly. Though I think they did try, just not the way they intended. They activated the override to force me to fire on my wingmen, to demonstrate the system could function without pilot cooperation. But General Bennett had established Protocol Zulu as a failsafe. Sarah nodded. A backdoor to the back door. His way of atoning, I think, for not standing with my father 10 years ago. Chen was quiet for a moment. What happens now? Investigation, prosecution, reform, hopefully. Sarah sighed, the weight of recent events settling fully on her shoulders. And for me, I'm not sure yet. There will be hearings, testimony. Your career may be over, Sarah acknowledged, or it may take a different direction. Either way, I can live with it. Another knock at the door revealed Jack Morrison, his weathered face showing the strain of the past days, but his eyes bright with vindication. Thought you might want to see this, he said, handing her a tablet displaying breaking news coverage. The headline read, Autonomous Weapons Program Exposed. Whistleblower Pilot Prevents Disaster. Below it was a split-screen image. On one side, her father in his flight suit from years ago. On the other, Sarah herself descending from her F-35 after today's flight. Like father, like daughter, Jack said softly. He would be so damn proud, Sarah. The next morning brought the formal announcement. All Thunderbolt 7 systems were being deactivated, pending comprehensive review. The 3 combat deployments had been retroactively classified as unauthorized and were being investigated for potential violations of rules of engagement and international warfare conventions. General Bennett had submitted his resignation, accepting responsibility for his role in allowing the program to proceed despite known flaws. But before departing, he had one final meeting with Sarah in his office, now half-packed in preparation for his successor. I wanted you to know, he said, handing her a folder. The Air Force is officially amending the record on your father's death. It will now reflect what we know to be true, that he died when his aircraft was compromised by an experimental system he was investigating for safety violations. Sarah accepted the folder, its official seal and amended stamp in stark red across the top. Thank you, General. This means a great deal. It's the least I could do. Bennett looked older now, the weight of a decade of compromised conscience visible in the lines of his face. Your father was right, Sarah, about everything. The system, the risks, the ethical boundaries we cannot cross, even in pursuit of military advantage. He would appreciate hearing you say that. Bennett nodded, his gaze drifting to the photos on his wall, decades of military service captured in images of aircraft ceremonies and the men and women he had commanded. I'm recommending you for command of the new Ethics in Aviation Technology Division. If you want it. The offer surprised her. After everything that's happened? Because of everything that's happened, the Air Force needs officers who understand where the line must be drawn, especially as AI and autonomous systems become more prevalent. And the powers that be are okay with putting the whistleblower in charge of ethics? Bennett's smile was tired but genuine. The powers that be are scrambling to demonstrate their commitment to reform. Having William Mitchell's daughter leading the ethics division makes for good optics. But more importantly, it's the right call. You've earned it. 2 weeks later, Sarah stood at her father's gravesite in Arlington National Cemetery. The morning was clear and cool, perfect flying weather. Jack stood beside her, as did Catherine Chen and Daniel Cooper. Henderson had come too, now wearing the stars of a newly promoted brigadier general tasked with reforming test protocols for advanced systems. The amended death certificate had allowed for a correction to her father's memorial stone. Where it had once read training accident, it now stated simply, in service to truth. Sarah placed her father's Zippo lighter at the base of the stone. A private token returned to its rightful owner. We did it, Dad, she said softly. They can't bury the truth anymore. The investigation continued to expand, uncovering a web of corruption and cover-ups that extended far beyond Thunderbolt 7. Other programs were being scrutinized, other technologies questioned. The fundamental principle her father had died defending, that warfare must remain under human ethical control, that some decisions could never be delegated to algorithm, was now driving a sweeping reassessment of military technology development. As the small group walked back through Arlington's solemn grounds, Henderson fell into step beside Sarah. The Ethics in Aviation Technology Division is officially established, he informed her. Your command, if you accept it. I accept, she said without hesitation. Someone needs to ensure this doesn't happen again. It won't be easy. There will be resistance, pressure to compromise. I'm a Mitchell, she reminded him with a slight smile. We don't compromise on matters of principle. 3 months later, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Ace Mitchell stood before the first class of officers assigned to her new division. Their faces reflected a mixture of curiosity, skepticism, and idealism. The perfect combination for the work ahead. Ethics isn't about checklists or regulations, she began, echoing words her father had once spoken to her. It's about remembering that technology serves humanity, not the other way around. especially in warfare, where the consequences of our decisions affect not just our lives, but the lives of countless others. She activated the screen behind her, displaying the official insignia of the Ethics in Aviation Technology Division, an eagle superimposed over a circuit board, with the motto her father had written in his final letter. Some decisions can never be delegated. The most advanced aircraft, the most sophisticated weapon systems. They're tools, not decision makers. The moral weight of warfare must always rest with human conscience. That's what we're here to protect. After the briefing, Sarah returned to her office. On her desk sat a framed photo, her father beside his F-16 from years ago, his expression confident and principled. Beside it, a newer image of her with her F-35, taken the day before the fateful demonstration flight. Outside her window, the afternoon sun glinted off aircraft moving across Edwards Air Force Base, human and machine in their careful dance of technology and control. She thought of her father, of his courage, of the legacy he had left her, not just of flying skill, but of unwavering moral compass. The Thunderbolt 7 program was gone, its fundamental flaws exposed, its champions facing justice. In its place, a new approach was emerging, one that recognized the irreplaceable value of human judgment in the most consequential decisions of warfare. Her phone rang. Jack Morrison, calling with updates on his comprehensive investigation into military-industrial corruption. "How's life in the ethics business?" he asked when she answered. "Challenging, important, exactly where I need to be." She looked again at her father's photo. He always said flying wasn't about the aircraft or the weapons. It was about the judgment and conscience of the person in the cockpit. Wise man, your father, would have loved seeing you follow in his footsteps, not just as a pilot, but as someone willing to stand for what's right, no matter the cost. Sarah smiled, feeling her father's presence more strongly than she had in years, not as a ghost or memory, but as a living legacy continued through her own choices and actions. "Some decisions can never be delegated," she said, echoing his words once more. "Not to machines, not to algorithms, not to anyone." As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the flight line, Sarah Ace Mitchell contemplated the sky that had claimed her father, but had also given her purpose. The same sky where she had nearly met the same fate, but had instead found vindication and a new mission. A mission not just of flying, but of ensuring that the thunder of jets across the heavens remained guided by the conscience of those who flew them, now and for generations to come. In the vastness of that desert sky, her father's spirit soared still, and now her own beside it, carrying forward the eternal vigilance that kept humanity at the heart of even its most advanced creations, not just for the honor of the uniform or the safety of the nation, but for the enduring principle that even in warfare, especially in warfare, human judgment must never be surrendered. That was her father's legacy. That was her mission now. That was the true meaning of honor in the skies. A note from the author. When I sat down to write this story, I knew I wanted to explore something that keeps me awake at night: the question of what we lose when we delegate life and death decisions to machines. As someone who spent years researching military technology and speaking with pilots, engineers, and veterans, I've heard countless variations of the same concern. We're building systems that can kill faster and more efficiently than humans, but we're not asking whether we should. Sarah Mitchell's story is fiction, but the ethical dilemma at its heart is very real. We stand at a crossroads where autonomous weapon systems are no longer science fiction, but emerging reality. The question isn't whether the technology exists. It does. The question is whether we're willing to cross the line that Sarah's father refused to cross, even at the cost of his life. I wrote this for my generation, those of us who grew up trusting in human judgment, human compassion, human accountability. We've watched technology transform every aspect of our lives, mostly for the better. But warfare is different. When a machine decides who lives and who dies, we've surrendered something essential about our humanity. We've created a tool that doesn't pause, doesn't question, doesn't carry the moral weight that should come with taking a life. What struck me most in researching this story was learning about the real pilots who've raised similar concerns, often at great personal cost to their careers. The Sarah Mitchells of the world exist, men and women who understood that efficiency isn't the only value that matters in warfare. Sometimes the inefficiency of human hesitation, human doubt, human conscience is exactly what prevents catastrophe. I hope this story makes you think about the world we're building for our children and grandchildren. Not just about weapon systems, but about all the places where we're tempted to let algorithms make decisions that humans should make. Because once we cross certain lines, once we establish certain precedents, there's no going back. Sarah's father left her a simple truth. Some decisions can never be delegated. That's not nostalgia or technophobia. That's wisdom we ignore at our peril. Thank you for reading, thank you for caring, and thank you for asking the hard questions about the kind of world we want to live in. The skies should always be guided by human conscience. Always.